There's two that are computer buttons. You have those off mute. Yeah, there's two buttons. They both look like a computer. Red buttons there. They're on the other side of the. You have the monitor buttons, then you have the steeple button, and then you have two of them that are computer buttons. They're controlled together. Hmm? No. On the soundboard. Well, I'm on. Now I'm on. You figure it out? Oh. We love technology here because we're all just trying to figure out our way in life. It's nice to have all the equipment that you need, right? But it's also nice to have people that know what they're doing to operate it as well. And Damien's really good at it, but we're all trying to figure out a new system. It's a new system, and we can't get Tony to go up there and help us at all. Well, just stay where you are then. That'd be fine. Stay where you are. So we're grateful you're here. Grateful those who are online with us. We have some online watchers that join us each night as well. And so we've been going through Genesis. We're now in 1 Samuel, and we're at chapter 4. It's kind of where we are in 1 Samuel. We're just kind of highlight through what's going on. Samuel is an interesting book because it's a transitional book. We're transitioning from judges in the land to kings. So it's a major book as far as transitioning goes. So there's a lot that's happening right there. So we've been in there. Samuel is grown now, and he is his mentor, I guess, Eli, has been told now that your sons are going to die because they're worthless. Basically, they're serving as judges and priests, but they're worthless. And Eli said, "Okay." Was pretty much all he said about that. Was Hophni and Phinehas, his sons, and it's going to happen here in just not too far here now. So you get to chapter 4, and it tells us that beginning right there, the word of the Lord, the word of Samuel came to all Israel. So he's speaking now. He's doing his thing, and you get there in verse 2. It tells us that just the beginning of that the Philistines drew up in battle array to meet Israel. So they're fixing to fight. The Philistines have been the nemesis of Israel, and I'm not sure that they aren't still the nemesis of Israel today. I don't know what their name would be under today, but it just seems like that Israel is always battling with something. And it tells us, if you move on through in chapter 4 down to verse 10, it tells us the Philistines fought Israel, and it says, and Israel was defeated, and every man fled to his tent. And so I've always found that to be interesting, that it's like you serve in all these stories, you serve in the military, but you serve militia style, because everybody's in their homes or at their tents or wherever it be, and as soon as they're done fighting, or if they're getting beat, they flee to their own tents. They go back home, or those that can get away go back to their own homes, to their own tents. So there's not like a military spot where they go to or where they're required to stay, as we understand military to be. They're called out to serve. And what I also find and I've mentioned this before, because it says there in verse 10, for instance, that the slaughter was very great, and there fell of Israel 30,000 foot soldiers. 30,000 in one major defeat. And I've tried to comprehend that, because that's not the only time that happens. It's numerous times, and I just keep thinking, where do all these men come from? How do they keep, I know, and we've mentioned this in the past about when Hannah was asking God for a son, before Samuel was born, that having numerous sons was a status symbol because you could have more property, more land, more work, everything, all that connected with the more sons that you had, the bigger your territory could be, and the more work that you could get out of them, and all that kind of stuff. And to not have sons at all was a diminishing thought of who you were. And when you read about these families, they had multiple sons, and I guess it's a good thing because every time there's a battle, it seems like there's multiple Israelites that are dying. And right here, there's just in this one battle that's happening right here, there's 30,000 who fall, just foot soldiers that fall. And I just find that incredibly hard to grasp. I find that hard to grasp that many would fall at one time, because it's not the only time that happens. Even God, when God moves, He wipes out His own or others as well by the thousands and thousands of people, and that's difficult for me to grasp a hold of. It tells us in verse 11 there in chapter 4 that the ark of God was taken. It was stolen. The Philistines took it, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died in there, as God said it was going to happen. The Lord told him that was going to take place, and Eli said, okay, thus be the word of the Lord there. And then you move on, and so the word comes from the battlefront, from a man of Benjamin. Came from the battle, and he ran to Eli to tell him what was going on. He saw Eli sitting on his seat by the road. If you look in verse 15, it tells us that Eli was 98 years old at this time. Old dude. Almost as old as Bobby. And almost. Just almost. Could not see. It says his eyes were set so that he could not see. The man told Eli, I come from the battle. I'm been a part of all this, and I escaped the battle line today. And Eli says, how's it going? How did it go? How's it turning out? And then he said in verse 17, the one who brought the news replied, Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there's also been a great slaughter among the people, and your two sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been taken. Now, when I read that, you look at there in verse 18, I find that interesting right here, because when he mentioned that the ark of God, it says Eli fell backward. It wasn't about his sons being killed. It was about the ark of God being taken. I guess he knew his sons were worthless and didn't have much, for them at all. But his neck was broken and he died because he said he was old and heavy. Old and heavy. My grandson the other day was enjoying playing at our house, and he was on his walkie-talkies. He's got one, and his grandmother had the other one. And I walked through into the room, and he said, Grandma, old man coming through. There's an old man coming through. I went, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And he, and she says, what's he wearing? And it happened to be this same color shirt and pants, and said, red shirt, brown pants, old man, be on alert, old man coming in. So at any rate, when you kind of finish out, I look at this as well. His daughter-in-law, verse 19, Phinehas' wife, she was expectant, about to give birth, and heard the news. First, and again, it's one of those interesting things right here, because the thing that is mentioned first wasn't about her husband being died. Now that's being killed. That's in there, but the order in which it's said right there, she hears that the ark of God was taken, that her father-in-law was dead, and then her husband. It mentions him last of the three things, and she went into labor, and she wound up dying as well. And if you want to know where the name Ichabod comes from, right there. She called out his name Ichabod while giving birth to him before she died herself in childbirth. So it's just a lot. Just all of a sudden, there's a lot of things happening, because the ark of God is a very significant event, the Ark of God being taken by the Philistines, is a very significant event in the role of in the history of Israel. This is I think the only time you ever see this, or the first time this has happened, with the Ark being taken. And in chapter 5 is all about what's happening with the Ark. So we go into chapter 5. Let's just, now that we got Damien back in order here, thank you for getting that hooked up and getting us rolling upstairs, Damien. Appreciate that very much. Let's just take off on this one a little bit. Damien, if you want to read a couple of verses for us right there in chapter 5, beginning in verse 1 through 3. 1 through 3.
After the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark to Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. They took Dagon and put him back in his place.
Okay, go ahead one more. Read one more while you're there.
But the following morning, when they rose, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. His head and hands had been broken off, and they were laying on the threshold. Only his body remained.
Yeah. So they take the ark of God, put the ark into their temple, put it right beside their god, Dagon. Come in the next morning, their God's laying over before the ark. Standing back up, next morning, laying over again. And at that time, head is broke off, and the hands are broke off as well. And it tells us there that they didn't mess with him anymore. They didn't mess with, we're in 1 Samuel 5, Debbie, so we are. And so they don't mess with that anymore. It says in verse 6 that the hand of the Lord was heavy on the Ashdodites, and he ravaged them and smote them with tumors, and both Ashdod and its territories. And so they said there in verse 7, get this ark out of here. We don't want this ark here anymore, because it's all it's doing for us is it's causing us problems, and that's that it was. So they sent and gathered the lords of the Philistines. Their priests said, "What do we do? How are we going to get rid of this ark? What do we need to do to get rid of the ark of God? How are we going to get rid of this thing?" And so they tell them, and it tells us the hand of the Lord was against them. There's a lot of confusion. Tumors broke out on them. People were dying. And so they sent the ark of God to Ekron. And the Ekronites, they didn't want the ark there either. No, don't bring it here. We've seen what it's done, but it was there for them. And so they gathered the lords of the Philistines and said, "Send away this ark. Get this thing away from us, away from us." And so you get into chapter 6, they want to know how do we get the ark back? How do we give it back to them? We've had this thing, 7 months now. And the priest, I don't know, I find this interesting what they were doing. For me, this is all kind of interesting stories, what they do. They just say, all right, we're going to send it back, but you can't send it back empty-handed. You got to send it back with a guilt offering, because we're guilty of taking it to begin with. And so they go, okay, in verse 4. Debbie, read verse 4 for us. I think this is a great verse.
The Philistines asked, "What guilt offering should we send to him?" They replied, five gold tumors and 5 gold rats, according to the number of the Philistine rulers, because the same plague has struck both you and your rulers.
Okay, I look at that and I'm going, that's a different kind of gift. They're represented. There's the 5 kings of the Philistines, and so they're sending 5 gold tumors. Whatever this is, that is growth or whatever that's on them. They're sending. But why are you sending the rats? Why I don't that part I don't get right there. Why they're sending these 5 gold, mine says mice, but 5 gold rats or whatever it may be. I guess because the mice have been ravaging the land. The rats have been ravaging the land. And so they want to send these as guilt offerings, send that with them. And then you get into verse 7. Lynn, or Don, are you, who can read? Lynn, okay, Lynn, you read. 7 and 8. Read verse 7 and 8. Okay. Go ahead and read one more, verse 9. Read verse 9. Yeah, okay. Make a new cart, build a new cart, put the ark on there. This is something else. If you read through this, you know the story and all. There was a price to pay for the Israelites when they touched the cart. When one of the guys, and we'll read that down the road shortly. But he put his hand on the cart to steady it, and God killed him, took him out. But here we have them doing this very thing. I was looking up because mine says milch cows, and I thought, what is a milch cow? So I went looking at some others, and it says milk. Just milk cows is what they are. What did yours say? Milch what? Kine. K-I-N-E. That's a cow. I guess that's what it is. A milk cow. You put a milk cow. Put 2 milk cows that have not been on a yoke, and take their calves home away from them. Yeah. So they took that. They did that. They put the ark on this new cart, and maybe slapped the rear end of the cows and said, go. And they just, and so they want to know. So that's what they did in verse 10. They did so, and they took those cows and they hitched them up to the cart and shut their calves up at home. They put the ark of the Lord on the cart, as it says, and the box with the golden rats and the likeness of their tumors, the gold tumors. And the cows headed straight to Beth Shemesh. And they went along the highway, and lowing as they went, my Bible says. They were just happy to be on the road, just headed out. They're just doing their thing. And so, and it says that there, you get to verse 13, the people of Beth Shemesh were happy to receive them. They saw it coming, and they're reaping, and they raised their eyes. They were glad to see the ark coming, and it came to the field of Joshua. So there they were. The Levites took hold of it, and I'm sure they did it correctly. The box was in it, and so, but then you move down to verse 19 of this text, and it's talking about what God did. Who's next? Lynn's already read. You don't want to read? You don't have to read. I don't care. I won't make you. Tyler's back there anxiously. Bill's waiting anxiously to read. We can have, any of the Purvis family that wants to read is welcome to read too. I'm not, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to, you can. Bill, read. Go ahead and read verse 19. Let's just see I want you to see what happens right here.
And then he spoke to the men of Bethshemesh, because they had looked into the ark of the Lord. Even he smote of the people 50,000 and 60 men. And the people lamented, because the Lord had smitten many of the people with a great laughter.
Okay, now catch that. Catch what he says right there. God struck down some of the men of Beth Shemesh because they had looked into the ark. 50,000, 70. 50,000. So in the short process of time among the Israelites right here, I know the Israelite nation, it's got to be huge, but in the short amount of time, 80,000 have been killed. And that's mind-blowing to me. That's just mind-blowing. I look at it and go, wow. Because they looked in the ark. And I don't know that all 50,000 had looked inside the ark, but somebody took the lid off and made it an open box, and that was not to be done at all. I mean, you're not supposed to touch a thing. You're not supposed to touch it, but they did. And so there was God was pretty serious about his box. I mean, there was something about that. He says, he gave him real definite instructions on what to do, how to handle it, the details of who should handle it, and all those things were there. And if you didn't follow that to the nth degree, God took you out. I think we miss something in this, in the seriousness that's involved in making a declaration that you are a follower or believer in God. I think that's still true today. I think it's still true today. I think we've cheated ourselves so much, and I think there have been, I'm not trying to say the judgmental aspect, but if you're going to look at the mercy of God, you also have to balance that with the judgment of God as well. Those, because they both still exist today, because it's in the Word. If it's in the Word, it's there, and God does cast judgment on things, and I think, and I fall victim of that as well. I say victim. I fall a culprit of that lack of commitment at times, where I need to be, what I should be doing, how I should be following what the Lord wants me to do. And I'm grateful for His mercy. I sure am. But I mean, more than anything else, I'm grateful for His grace and mercy that keeps me somewhere close in there. But what we learned throughout all of this Old Testament is that God is serious about His relationship that He has with His people. I mean, even the relationship that He has with us through the blood of Jesus Christ, God is still very serious about that relationship. And if we don't take that relationship serious, I think we miss out, and I think we cheat ourselves, and I think we condemn ourselves to things that maybe would never be a part of our lives. I don't know. It's one of those goes. I step out into a foreign territory even as I say those things. But just having lived and served now for 42 years in ministry, I see how God's hand has moved in one way or another at times, and the price that's paid for there. Okay, I've camped out there long enough. If you move on in here, go into chapter 7. You end up chapter 6. The men of Beth Shemesh said, "Who's able to stand before the Lord? We can't, how do we do this? How are we supposed to do this?" And so they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, saying that the Philistines have brought back the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it. Even the Israelites are going, somebody else needs to take this. The people of Beth Shemesh going, we don't need this anymore. I got it. Somebody else needs this box. We can't handle the ark anymore. And so the men, we start out verse 1, that the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took the ark of the Lord and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill and consecrated Eleazar, his son, to keep the ark of the Lord. Now, what's significant about that is the fact that really for me, the next verse becomes significant here. And it says, "And from that day the ark remained at Kiriath Jearim." The time was long, for it stayed there for 20 years. So in one verse, we've advanced 20 years. And the ark has stayed there in that house. So moving into verse 3, who's next? Tyler. Read verse 3. I won't put everything on you, but just read verse 3 for me. Wait. Chapter 7. You weren't paying attention to me, were you?
And Samuel said to the whole house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, then rid yourself of the foreign gods and the
Ashtaroth. Yeah, go ahead. You got it.
Ashtoreths, and commit yourself to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines.
Okay. Battles. I mean, it's still another battle aspect of the Philistines are there. So the sons of Israel, they removed the Baals and the Ashtaroths, and they served the Lord alone. And what I want you to see, go to verse 6 right here. The very last part of verse 6 tells us that in Samuel judged the sons of Israel at Mizpah. So this is this is where we're reading that Samuel is taking on the role of judge. He is serving as one of the last priests or last judges of Israel. But he's letting us know this is his time now. He's serving as a judge now, and he's judging the people. And in verse 15 of that same chapter, you go right there, and it tells us that now Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. And he becomes the last judge of Israel, because after him becomes the kings. And when the kings take over, the judges stop. So we have the kings that are going to do this thing now. Then you get into chapter 8, which starts again. And Debbie, read verse 1, right there in chapter 8.
When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel.
Okay. Son, he's got Joel and Abijah are his sons. And what's funny about this is that they're worthless too. They're like Hophni and Phinehas. They're like they're cut from the same mold right there. And it says in verse 3 that his sons did not walk in his ways, but sought after dishonest gain and took bribes and perverted justice and all that good stuff. So they were just like Hophni and Phinehas. And there's going to be a judgment that's cast down upon them as well. They're going to pay the price for that. And so you get to verse 4 and 5. Damien, read verse 4 and 5 for us.
So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have."
Okay, so here's the declaration. They come to you and said, "You're old and your sons are worthless." You ever heard that, Tony? You're old? Never. What a nice feeling that must be. I'd never heard it either till the other night. So this is the first. We want to judge. Appoint a king over us. Appoint a king for us to judge us like all the other nations. That's the declaration they want. It says that this was displeasing in the sight of Samuel. And when they said this, gives the king, he prayed and he talked to God about this. And basically, and the Lord tells him there in verse 7, you go ahead and do what they say, because they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And I think that's probably one of those things where we could learn lessons from that one as well, how we operate so much by sight, not by faith. God was calling his people to live by faith. That he was their king, he was their God, God was going to take care of them. And they said, no, that's not what we want. We want some visible understanding of what life is. So we want a king, like all these other nations have. And what they're saying is that who will take us into wars and fight our battles for us. But what it is, what becomes of this though? These next verses, I think, all this is being set up because the king is coming. Things are about to change. But we're going in depth in some of these things because I want you to see what it is. So Samuel, there in verse 10, Lynn, read verses 10 and 11 for us, please. Okay. What I want you to capture out to this is that he will take. I want you to know what the king is going to do. He will take, verse 12, he will appoint for himself. Verse 13, he will also take your daughters for perfumers and cooks and bakers. Verse 14, he will take the best of your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves. Verse 15, he will take a tenth of your seed and of your vineyards and give to his officers and to his servants. Verse 16, he will also take your male servants and your female servants. Verse 17, he will take a tenth of your flocks. Verse 18, then you're going to cry out in that day because the king whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you on that day. King is going to take. He's going to take this. He's going to take this. He's going to take this. He's going to take your family. He's going to take your fields. He's going to take your flocks. He's going to take a tenth of all these other things. He's going to take. He's going to take. He's going to take. And when he takes everything that you've got, then you're going to come crying to me, and I'm not going to listen to you. You know? This is what's going to happen. This is what the Lord says right here. This is what's going to happen. But verse 19, Bill, verse 19.
Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us,
Go to 20 as well. Go ahead and read verse 20.
that we also may be like all these nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles.
You think that's going to happen? I mean, he's going to go out because that's what they did. Kings went out to battles. But man, to hear and understand everything that he's going to take from them, because he's not had a king before. There's not been a king there before, and so Samuel's saying, this is what you're going to find out. This is what's going to happen. And then their response is, nope, we want a king. My mind's made up. Don't bother me with the facts. My mind's made up. We want a king. Okay. Because we want to be like everybody else. We want our battles, we want somebody to lead us in our battles. Well, they already had that. The judges were doing that. That's what their job was. They were leading people. They were doing their thing. That's what I mean. When we take our eyes off God and decide that we want things our way, there is a price to pay for that. If I say that I'm a believer and a follower of Jesus Christ and I put my faith in him and I know that my name is written down in the Lamb's Book of Life, but I openly and willingly decide to go against what God says, there's a price that's going to be paid for that. I mean, I don't know what it would be, but there's a price that's paid for that. When Jesus was being convicted, and they were yelling out, crucify him, crucify him. And, and he said, whatever, I blank, said Herod said, his blood is on your hands, not mine. And the crowd shouted out, yeah, his blood's on our hands and our children and our grandchildren. And it's just, I'm thinking, I wouldn't want to say that for my kids or my grandchildren or my greats or whatever may come along. I want my blood to be on their hands. But this is what Samuel is saying to them. Now, okay, verse 21, now after Samuel had heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the Lord's hearing. The Lord said to Samuel, listen to their voice and appoint them a king. And so Samuel said to the men of Israel, go every man to his city. All right, y'all go home. We'll find a king. We'll find a king. And I think that's, it's almost like a disappointing end to Samuel. I mean, he's not done. He's still doing a lot of work, but he's not done. Then you get into chapter 9, and here the search is on. Who's up here? Tyler, you up? Yeah. Chapter 9, verse 1 and 2.
There was a Benjamite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish, son of Abel, the son of Zerah, son of Burkhard, the son of, well, you got me good on that.
I did that on purpose.
He had a son named Saul, an impressive young man without equal among the Israelites, a head taller
Yeah, okay. So here's Saul, who is I guess, the Abraham Lincoln of his day. Stands taller than anybody else, head taller than everybody, and so he's a good-looking young man. I don't know what that means, if that, why that makes a difference, but there he was, and so the story in how this all starts and how they come to him. They lost the donkeys. The donkeys got out, and Saul and one of the servants, they went looking for them, and they couldn't find them, and so they kept looking for them, and then finally the servant said, "There's a man of God who is in this city, and we need to go talk to him." But before you actually get there, it tells us in verse 15 of chapter 9 there, the day before Saul's coming, the Lord had revealed this to Samuel. "This time tomorrow, I'm going to send a man to you, land of Benjamin. You're going to anoint him to be prince over my people Israel. He's going to deliver my people from the hand of the Philistines, for I've regarded my people because their cry has come to me." And when Samuel, verse 17, when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said to him, "Behold, the man of whom I spoke to you. This one shall rule my people." And so he approached him and told him what he was going to be doing right here. Move over to verse 22, Debbie. Read verse 22 right there for us in chapter 9.
And then Samuel brought Saul and his servant into the hall and seated them at the head of those who were invited, about 30 in number.
Okay, so Samuel has told Saul and his servant, "Y'all go up the hill where we're going to meet, and I'm going to feed you. There's a banquet going on. Y'all go up there and sit down and there." So from there, he tells them this is what's going to happen. In verse 27, go ahead, read verse 27 for us as well, if you would. I'm just skipping through.
As they were going down to the edge of the town, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the servant to go on ahead of us." And the servant did so. "But you stay here a while, so that I may give you a message from God."
Yeah, how about that? I got something to tell you, a message from the Lord for you. And that's very important, because if the man of God, if this prophet was going to tell him something, then that's a pretty big deal. I've got a message for you from God. And then chapter 10 begins, Damien, right there. Read verse 1.
Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it on Saul's head and kissed him, saying, "Has not the Lord anointed you ruler over his inheritance?"
There you go. Anoints him with oil and says, "Here you are, big guy. God has anointed you." And then he gives him this is what's going to happen. Okay, he tells him in verse 2, "When you go from me today, this is what's going to happen." And then in verse 3, then you go from there, this is going to happen. There's a series of things that are going to happen. Verse 5, "Afterward you will come to the hill of God, where the Philistine garrison is." That's going to happen. You're going to meet prophets there coming down from the high place, and they're going to be prophesying at that time. They're going to be playing the harp and tambourine and flute. There's just a series of things that's going to happen, and Samuel lets him know, this is what's going to take place. This is what's going to happen, because this is going to be an affirmation that God has appointed you. And so this is what happens. Things happen. And he says, then verse 6, "And the Spirit of the Lord is going to come upon you mightily. You're going to prophesy with them and be changed into another man." And that's, that would be that point where we would think that God's going to fill him with his Spirit at this point right here. And he's going to be changed into another person. And it's going to be with these signs: "Come to you, do for yourself what the occasion requires, because God is with you." And verse 9 tells us that it happened just as it was described. Everything took place just the way it was supposed to. So this is what all is going on right there. Then you get into verse 17. Lynn, read verse 17 and 18. Okay, but today, right? that what's next? But today. Go ahead, read verse 19 as well. All right. Verse 20, Bill, you in the mood? Let's go now. Verse 20 through 24.
And when Samuel had caused all the tribes of Israel to come near, the tribe of Benjamin was taken. When he had caused the tribe of Benjamin to come near by their families, the family of Matri was taken, and Saul the son of Kish was taken, and when they sought him, he could not be found. Therefore they inquired of the Lord further if the man should yet come thither, and the Lord answered, Behold, he hath hid himself among the stubble. And when they ran and fetched him thence, and when he stood amongst the people, he was higher than any of the people from his shoulders and upward. And when Samuel said to all the people, See ye him whom the Lord hath chosen, for there is none like him among all the people. For all the people shouted and said, God save the king.
Yeah. There he is. There he is. And things are fixing to happen. Things are going to change. It's going to be, a lot of stuff's going to happen at this point. But the process of getting this first king in place, moving from a judge, as Samuel was serving as a judge over the land, to choosing a king, which becomes Saul, and Samuel is going to operate with him. There's a lot of things that transpired to get this into place, what's going to happen. So I felt like it's important that we look at those things, and then you're just going to find a whole lot of battles and stuff going on. And Samuel is going to take kind of a lesser role at this point. He's still going to be very much in 1 Samuel. He's not in 2 Samuel at all, but he's in 1 Samuel. But that's how the king comes into play right here. And I shared last week before that the reason that there's 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel is because the scribes that were writing it, the scroll wasn't big enough. And so it only had so much on a parchment, and they wrote, and so it used to just be Samuel. But now it's 1 Samuel on the first scroll and 2 Samuel on the second scroll. And that's the difference between the two. But understanding, just seeing how Israel is changing, how their lives are changing, and how the nation is changing. Because we're still working in the sense that God is, the understanding is over the nation rather than the individual. It's just still a national thing. It still is for them, but it's rather than being individuals. We understand our relationship for them. It's a national thing. And so if you were an Israelite, you were a believer in the monotheistic God. You were a believer in the one God, not because of anything other than the fact that that's your nationality. That's who you are. But now the king is in place, and things are really going to change at this point. And we're going to find out there's going to be a whole lot more battles and a lot more men that are going to die. And that being said, it's 7:28, so I'm going to stop at that point right there. We'll pick up at chapter 11 and move quickly through some of these other chapters in this next time we gather around. Thank you all for being here this evening, being a part of our time together, studying the Word a little bit, and maybe grabbing a little bit of refreshing knowledge upon there. Thanks for being online with us tonight. Those who are with us tonight, Miss Mary, good to see you. Although I don't see you at all, but I expect that you're there somewhere. So letting us know whether you can hear me or not. I'm sure that's the case, and I appreciate it. Hey, let's stand together. We'll be dismissed in prayer. Praise the Lord for the time He gives us, and we'll close out our time together. Bobby, you've been quiet all evening. Would you pray for us?